in the country. Moving on, INEC Yakubu proceeds on terminal leave, hands over to Agbamuche Mbu. Tinubu honors him with national award. And that story is on page 26. New tax regime. Federal government targets relief for 98% of workers. That story on page 6. ACF wants federal government to protect Dangote refinery in nation's interest. That story is on page 27. Of course, that is also another issue that has, raised so many eyebrows. People have raised so many eyebrows about that this particular issue, talking of Pengasan and Dangote, and of course the impact on the people and how it has affected the daily living of Nigerians. And just a few days ago we're talking about gas scarcity and price hike. We just hope over the coming days, things will definitely get better. And lastly, on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning is on health. CDC ends universal recommendation for COVID-19 vaccine. And that story is on page 10. Taking some of the inside stories now, starting with a story on page 3, how intelligence report led EFCC to investigate ex-NSA Dasuki, others. And that's coming from a witness. Awolowo Dosumu, others laud contribution of Agoro to Japanese studies in Africa. That story is on page 4. Oshun withheld local government funds. Supreme Court reserves judgment in state suits against AGF. 2027. Groups rally marking day for presidency. All stories on page 4. Moving on to page 5 on business and economy. CBN bars debtors, blacklisted BVNs from operating as BCOS agents. Federal government assures local refiners commitment to Naira for crude oil sale agreement. And here we have NASA's 70 billion Naira boost rekindles credit flow to Nigeria's food economy. All stories on page 5. Moving on to page 14, exploring Adeswa's perspectives on Israel and the rest of them towards motivating antiquity protection officers in NCMM. That's on Art and Review on page 12. NAN's others rise against Pengasan in Oyo, rally in support of Dangote refinery. That's on page 13. Still on the same page, ADC determined to save our democracy. And that's coming from David Mark. Decries legislature, judiciary's loss of independence. Ola Welpo Hashim is true unifier of North, South. And that's coming from Dinfa YCD coordinator. Court throws out Magodo residents' right suits, awards 50,000 Naira costs. Reps to debate motion on reported deteriorating health of Nnamdi Kanu. Lagos fire tragedy, Falana calls for inquest into Afriland Tower death. That story is on page 16. And on page 17, we have INEC, the burden of Mahmoud's successor. That's on page 17. In every free, fair election, Igbo people will win. And that's coming from John Uche. John Uche is the first president of Ohaneze Ndigbo in Lagos. IPAC, other stakeholders list tasks ahead of commission. People are crying of hunger. Tinubu should listen. And that's on page 19. Owerri, in the heartland of the Southeast, President Tinubu strengthens bond. Aregbeshola's call for party-nominated INEC officials lacks logic. Nigeria's digital future at risk as broadband gaps threaten economic growth. And that's a report on page 21. Nigeria sets bold agenda to shape future of AI. And that's coming from NITDA Boss. China, UK to launch research center in Orca. All stories on page 21. Taking some of the sports stories now on page 31 of the Nigerian Tribune. Under 20 World Cup, Flying Eagles, Argentina set for grudge game. Eagles can't beat Bafana to World Cup ticket, and that's coming from Ugo Bruce. We must beat Rwanda before Nigeria showdown. That's on page 31. And lastly, we have Hoops and Reed win CDS Unity basketball tourney. And that's all on the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Over to you, Victor.
Well, Vanguard newspaper right in front of me this morning, and we have interesting headlines. Lagos Rivers FCT lead as IGI rises 49% to 3.63 trillion naira. You find more of that story on page 19. On page 7, Minister Uche Naji resigns amid certificate forgery allegations. On page 37, Iyaloja, Benin market women back monarch for upholding Edo heritage. And on page 9, Tinubu seeks National Assembly approval for $2.3 billion external borrowing, so that's $500 million sovereign sukuk. All right, some more stories right here. Well, there are several pictures that you can see of the federal highways of Oro 2. Motorists, travelers in anguish, cry out for urgent government intervention. Lack of funds hampering our intervention. FEMA is the one speaking here. These are pictures from the southeast and the north. There are more stories on that on page 11. Well, we have this one also. Anekcha, Yakubu bows out. Agbamu Jembu steps in. A peep into Yakubu's 10-year sojourn. You find more of that on page 28, but the main story is on page 5. We have the reforms, challenges, and controversies also in there. And we have this one that continues on to page 8. Only Northern Christian presidents can protect Northern Christians, says Dinfa, the YCD coordinator, as a rally support for Olawipo Ashim. On page 9, Natasha Akpoti-Uduahan resumes at plenary. Boko Haram not going after Christians only. That's coming from General Irabo. And you find more of that on page 9 as well. Now, flipping to the stories that we have on the inside pages of the Vanguard newspaper for today, we have Enugu government ensures 9,000 farmers, partners presidency on food security. No LGA under siege of bandits. That's coming from the Kwara government. And you find more of that on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. On page 6, interesting stories, intriguing ones actually. Big Brother, Emisi receives 150 million naira prize, set sights on Nollywood career, says I hope to work with Funke Akindele. Federal government seeks evacuation of Nigerian pastor from Benin. Customs intensifies anti-smuggling operations, seizes 8 trailers of rice, arrests 4 suspects. And courts restrains Navy from executing arrest of retired Vice Admiral. Alleged $4.5 billion fraud. A Mayfield's phone forensic test stalled as EFCC and defense disagree. Corrupt civil servants allegedly fingered in Rivers Secretariat fire. And 10 teachers escaped death while returning from celebration. That's a huge one. All right, flipping on to what we have on page 8. UN Special Envoy launches global campaign to improve road safety in Nigeria. ADC sets sights on 2027 victory, says a failure is not an option. Alleged Christian genocide, more U.S. senators seek redesignation of Nigeria as country of particular concern. And World Day for Decent Work, NLC blasts Shetima over Dangote. We have Nigeria's share sector rebounds as local processing supports revenue growth. Right, so what we have on page 9, we have interesting stories across board, but there's this big one. ASU NASU strike threats. Federal government inaugurates Yayale Ahmed-led negotiation committee. Well, it will be quite interesting to see what will be done from here. On what we have on page 10, Peter Obi, Lagos APC disagree over demolition of Aspam Dam markets. And withheld Osun local government funds. Supreme Court reserved judgment in suit against AGF. Oyo LG officials to Makinde run for president in 2027. Well, That'll be quite an interesting one coming from the local government's offices and the governor of the state. Well, Ogun Airport project aligns with predecessors' vision as coming from Abiodun. And yes, indeed, there are pages of those, federal highways of Oro, as I put it, where motorists and travelers have been in anguish. Continues from page 11 down to, look at page 13 right here. On high tech, Nigeria's digital divide leaves rural communities in the dark. And that's on page 14. Tech Connect payments will headline Digital Nigeria discussions in Enugu, Abuja, and Lagos. We have on page 15, but Jabia Miller takes free healthcare mission to Lagos Riverine community. Bravery, absent on constructive criticism, effective communication at Delcom 2025. And we have more interesting stories on the pages of the Vanguard newspaper on business. We have real revenue rises 37.36%, 2.72 billion naira in Q1 of 2025. And we have this one also in India, Customer Service Week 2025, where people celebrate right there. 98% of Nigerians to enjoy crashing tax rate or total exemption in 2026. That's coming from Oyedele. He's lamenting death threats right here. More on that on page 20. He flows onto page 21. On page 20 still, federal government moves to rejuvenate textile industry. That will be a huge one right there. Okay, flipping on to what we have. On page 30, we have Ebonyi begins payment of 10 billion naira, 19 years gratuity to 4,000 local government retirees. Ite clash in reps as Agocha confronts Speaker over Kanu's health. Enugu community appeals to Tinubu to revisit Obolo dry port. There's also this one. Imo government cracks down on illegal private schools. Tinubu's project in Southeast overhyped in the media. That's coming from an ex-rep. And on insecurity, on the Southeast Voice on page 31. Insecurity, why Southeast governments are resorting to vigilante outfits, collaborate with conventional security operatives. They must be well-trained and disciplined. That's coming from a retired security personnel. From Bruce. And also, we have on that same 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifier.